What's the deal, my people? You know it is Don Tony Teflon, and I'm back at you with another one. And this one is Constellation Episode 4 Breakdown. We will go over everything that happened in this episode. I will give you all of my theories, and I will tell you exactly what I think is going to happen in the future. And if you like that, do me a favor, please hit that thumbs up button. We're trying to hit 500 likes. That's what triggers the YouTube algorithm. We get there and YouTube pushes this video out. And subscribe so you can join us on the call-in live streams and give all your thoughts on what you think is happening in this show. Are you ready? Let's do it. This episode shakes things up right off the bat when we get there, because when we see the 5 weeks ahead scenes, it's always been Alice and her mother, but now we see Alice and her father. And I have to suspect that this right here is Alice 1. Now remember, Alice 1 is the one who cares about her mother. The second, Alice 2, doesn't care about her mother. And this one, we see that she is really concerned, and he's trying to convince her that she's not coming back. We're never going to see her again. And that's why they're out there looking for her at this particular time. We see Jo 1 getting some help from the psychiatrist, and of course the psychiatrist is giving her drugs, trying to medicate her. We find out later in the episode exactly what's going on with the medicine, because she tries them both out. She tries them and she realizes that they're the same exact medicine that they're giving her. So they are trying to purposely keep her medicated because they do not want her to talk about what really happened out there. Bud is dealing with the after effects of the murder that he committed. The FBI get called out onto the boat to investigate this crime, and he realizes that there's cameras all over the boat. As for anybody who has ever been on a cruise before, you know that there's cameras all over the boat. So why he didn't think there was is beyond me. In this episode, we see Henry trying to convince other scientists that his findings are actual, that the test that he ran in space was a success and also can be duplicated back on Earth, but it's only duplicated when he looks at it. He's the only way that can trigger it, and he can see it in his mind, but he can't show it to other people. Other people can't perceive it. Jo 1 is trying to connect with her daughter Alice 2, but she can't really break through to her. But she does find out that she is afraid, and she goes inside of cupboards when she gets afraid. And she also finds out that she does not speak her native Swedish, which we know Alice 1 does speak Swedish with their mother. Now when the episode ends, we are left with a cliffhanger, and that is Magnus dead? Jo and Magnus argue about having a relationship with Frederick, because Frederick claims he and Jo were having an affair, but he was having an affair with Jo. It was just Jo 2, not Jo 1. And the reason why this whole thing blew up is because Jo figured out that he was having an affair with the school teacher. He did say he kissed the school teacher, but while she was at the school and she was doing a little service for the kids, she realized how close they were. And Jo, at the end, she can't take it anymore. She pushes Magnus and he hits his head on the edge of Jo's piano before falling to the ground. Now, if he is dead, then that means the person in the opening scene must be Magnus 1, not Magnus 2, because this is Magnus 2 that hit their head against the piano. Next most important thing that we see in this episode is the confirmation that Jo 2 has died. Not only did she died in the space program. Something that I called, something that I suspected that happened. It was after waking up in the middle of the night, Alice walks down the stairs of her home and gets a vision of an alternate reality in her living room. And what she sees is her mother's funeral. Not only does she see her mother's funeral, she sees herself. And when she sees herself, that's what scares her and shocks her back into reality. Now we could tell that she's been seeing this multiple times, and that's why she's afraid. That's why she hides in the cupboard, and her father is just not believing her on everything that she's seeing. And that is what's going to bond her with Jo 1, because Jo 1 is going through the exact same thing, and now she's going to be able to relate to Alice 2, and Alice 2 is going to start to care about her mother after this. We also seen that Jo figured out that she could play the piano when she had no skills of playing the piano in her lifetime. Let me say this again just so people could understand. Jo 1 was moved over into Jo's 2 universe, and Jo 1 is now dealing with Alice 2. So that vision proves that Alice's 2 real mother is killed in the accident. Paul survived and she was killed. And Jo 1's daughter, Alice 1, was the one that was attending the funeral because those two people got swapped. Now, before the credits roll, we are presented with the painting. Now, in alternate reality, it's an angel, but this one, it's a devil. And this devil painting was made by Hugo Simberg, and it's called The Poor Devil by the Fire, the Devil by the Pot. The painting shows a devil standing by a fire, brewing a smoking pot, as two humans look at him in disbelief. Now, the painting seems to be capturing the dual reality of good and evil. We hear that when we hear that the one person who was in the sky, one of the astronauts, and they came back, said that they felt like God had touched them. We also hear that when we hear Martin say that some astronauts, when they start flying high, it feels like God's hand is pushing on one of the wings of the plane. Now, some people may look at this and say that this devil represents Jo 1 because they think that Jo 1 killed her husband. If Magnus is dead, well, didn't kill her real husband, but killed her alternate reality husband, and she's associated with the devil, but I think it's exactly the opposite. She's associated by the other picture, and Jo B is the one who's associated with the devil because Jo B was the one who was having the affair. Jo B was the one who was cheating on her husband and didn't really care that much about her daughter, and she herself is dead, died while she was in space, and could be considered to be associated with the devil one, not the angel painting. We also find out that not just Jo, a whole bunch of other astronauts were given these antipsychotic drugs, including Henry when he was up there. And we find this out when Jo researches more about the tablet she was given. She learns that most astronauts who return from space received a different set of pills called vitamin A. However, she, Henry, and a bunch of others got vitamin B, and vitamin B were the ones, the antipsychotic ones that they were given because people did not believe what they seen or did not want them to expose to the world what happened to them while they were in space. So this means that unless they ran the same experiment every time every astronaut went up, that something else has triggered these two universes to intertwine the way that they have. Now, when dealing with Henry's Cal experiment, we can see that this is what's happening to the people in this world, because similar to the particles Henry describes in his thought experiments, the characters of Constellation exist in multiple states. However, after being exposed to Henry's Cal experiment, so we think they are somehow experiencing the state where their alternate states all exist in one reality. And when you deal with quantum superposition, the same particle can exist in multiple states at the same time, which defies the laws of classical physics. However, when one attempts to measure or observe the particles, they collapse into a certain state that can be described using classical physics. This collapse is the superposition of the particle is called the observer effect, and that is happening with Henry, as he is the observer and he can see what's going on, but the other people cannot, and he tries to explain this to his colleague, but his colleague just can't grasp it. Because he's a scientist, and all scientists deal with facts, and they need something to say that this is what's happening instead of relying on somebody's memory. Another big moment of this episode is when we see Jo when she's walking around the laboratory after she goes and figures out exactly what the pills are, and she sees Henry on the video conference with Bud. and Bud is complaining to Henry about actually what happened. Now, whether that's Bud on the computer or they swap positions at this particular time, I think is what's up for debate. Was that Henry sitting on the computer talking to Bud, or did Bud swap positions with Henry? The number one thing this shows is that they are aware of each other, and they have been communicating for a long time, because we see when the cameras come back on and an FBI agent is looking into them, all of a sudden we can see that they get interfered with, and she's not able to see exactly what happened or who threw the man off the boat. So for this reason, I have to believe that this is who Henry was calling his brother when he was talking about it in episode 2, and Bud saying that he hasn't spoken to his brother in a long time and for good reason, and he was happy about that whole situation. So I think that Irene also has to be down with this whole situation. I don't see any other way it could possibly be, but Henry and Irene both know what's going on. That's why she was stressing so much that she could not have seen a Des cosmonaut going in the air and floating in the air, because that is Irene floating as that Des cosmonaut, another version of Irene who did not make it in one of her missions. That leads us to the tape recordings that were sent to her, and when she listened to these tape recordings, she could hear the background noise of the people that were in NASA at the time, and we can see that her family had planned on leaving her to die. And why were they going to do that? Well, he was upset that her other version, which is Jo 2, was having an affair, so he wasn't really caring if she actually made it home or not, which is wrong for him to do, because he should just care the fact that it's his baby's mom and that he should just care that she makes it back. But because of the affair and the fact that he was having an affair with the teacher, he was just ready to call it quits, let her die, and just go on with his life. And she figured that out, and once she figured that out and she heard the tapes, that's what led her to do what she did, push him, and then his head hit on the piano. And that's where we end this episode. Again, a lot of these things that we talked about, I had already predicted and got right. So we're going to see where this takes us in the next episode. I think it was a brilliant episode, especially when you have shows like this. It's hard for them to give us the answers without giving too much away. And I think they found a really nice medium in this show to give you the answers that you're seeking, but still not give everything away. So I can't wait for the next episode to come out. Again, we'll be live streaming this week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. You hit that thumbs up button. We're trying to get to 500 likes. When we get to 500 likes, that's what triggers the YouTube algorithm, and that's how we get put out in front of everyone. So if you like the way I do this, please thumbs up this, spread this across the realm, and of course, subscribe. And until next time, you know who it is. Peace and stay sexy.